Ukraine wipes out FPV swarms with a $40,000 AI drone. It is Monday, January 26, 2026. The battlefield is changing right before our eyes. We are witnessing a clash between cheap garage-built swarms and high-tech autonomous interceptors, and the stakes could not be higher. Before we jump in, if you want to stay ahead of the curve, make sure you subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me with Arya in the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover a story that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a cyberpunk novel, but it is happening right now in the mud and snow of Eastern Europe.
Oh, it is definitely not fiction.
We're looking at the U.S. Marine Corps' recent, massive $24 million bet on the Anduril Bolt M. It's a kamikaze drone, technically a loitering munition, that reports suggest might already be hunting targets in Ukraine as we speak. And here is where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about a new gadget with a cool name. It is about a massive clash of philosophies. On one side, you have the, quantity has a quality of its own approach, the $500 drone taped together in a basement. On the other, you have this AI-powered $40,000 smart weapon. The question we are exploring today is, can a robot replace the courage of a human pilot? And what happens when the kill chain, the time from spotting a target to destroying it, shrinks from minutes to mere seconds?
That is the core conflict. We are going to analyze everything from U.S. Marine Corps contracts to battlefield reports from the front lines in Ukraine, and even some dense academic papers on doctrinal shifts to understand if this is just a new toy or if it's the future of automated warfare.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the hardware itself because I think there is a misconception about what military drone means these days. The U.S. Marine Corps calls this the Organic Precision Fires Light Program, or OPFL. They dropped nearly $24 million on roughly 600 of these units. Deliveries are starting effectively now, early 2026. But, when I hear military drone, I still have that mental image of a Predator or a Reaper.
Oh, yeah.
Something the size of a Cessna that needs a runway and a hangar.
This is the complete opposite of that. The M in Bolt M stands for munition, but you should really think of it as a backpack smart bomb. It's a VTOL quadcopter that stands for vertical takeoff and landing. It weighs roughly, 13 to 15 pounds?
Okay.
To put that in perspective, that's about the weight of a heavy rucksack or a generic light machine gun. You don't need a runway, you don't need a catapult or a complicated launch rail.
That logistics piece is huge. I mean, if you're a squad leader pinned down in a cramped urban alleyway or hiding in a dense tree line, you can't exactly call in an airstrike or spend 20 minutes setting up a pneumatic launcher.
Exactly. A soldier pulls this out of a pack, snaps it together, and it's in the air in 5 minutes. It carries a 3-pound warhead. Now, 3 pounds doesn't sound like a lot if you're comparing it to a cruise missile.
Right.
But for precision work, that is substantial. It's plenty for anti-personnel work or disabling light vehicles or even, punching through the top armor of a tank if you hit it right. But the wow factor isn't the explosion, it's the reach. It has a range of over 20 kilometers and can loiter, hence the name, for 40 minutes.
20 kilometers is a serious distance for something that fits in a backpack. That puts an awful lot of enemy artillery, supply trucks, and command posts well within reach of a single infantry squad.
Okay.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. We see videos on social media every day of cheap commercial drones flying pretty far. Why is the Marine Corps paying a premium for this? What is the secret sauce?
The secret sauce isn't the rotors or the plastic, it's the code. It runs on Anduril's Lattice AI platform. And this is where we see the biggest disconnect between the cheap hobbyist stuff and the professional military-grade gear. In Ukraine right now, the biggest enemy of the drone pilot isn't bullets, it is jamming, electronic warfare, or EW.
Right, the invisible wall. We've read reports where Ukrainian pilots say they fly towards a target, hit a wall of static, and just lose the bird completely.
Exactly. With a standard FPV first-person view drone, you need a constant radio link. The pilot wears goggles and steers the drone manually. If the enemy jams that signal, the screen goes black and the drone falls out of the sky. The Bolt M solves this with onboard mission autonomy.
Mission autonomy. That's a buzzword we hear a lot in these defense contracts. What does it actually look like in practice for the operator in the trench?
It means the drone has a brain. The operator looks at a tablet, sees the video feed, and just draws a box around a target, maybe a tank, maybe a trench line. They click go.
That's it.
At that moment, the human is essentially done.
So even if the radio link is cut right after that click, even if the Russians blast the area with full-spectrum jamming.
The drone doesn't care. It stops listening to the radio and starts looking with its own eyes, using computer vision to lock on to the visual profile of the target. It adjusts for wind, it adjusts for target movement, and it flies itself into the impact point.
Wow.
It is true fire and forget at the squad level.
That is terrifyingly effective. You are essentially firing a smart missile that can hover and think for itself for the last mile.
That is a great way to put it. And that brings us to the proving ground. Because while the Marines are buying this, the real testing is almost certainly happening in Ukraine.
We've seen the reports from Defense Express and United 24. They're hinting pretty heavily that the Bolt-M is likely already there for combat testing.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, Ukraine is currently the world's laboratory for drone warfare. And we need to be clear, this technology is vital for Ukraine's survival and, by extension, European security. They are facing an adversary with massive resources. Innovation is how they level the playing field.
When you are fighting a larger force, you have to be smarter.
Exactly.
I read a stat recently that said drones now account for something like 70 to 80% of battlefield casualties. That is an insane shift from just a few years ago. It's truly a drone war. But I also saw a really interesting thread on Credible Defense titled, "Why FPV Drones Kinda Suck."
Yes. That was a fascinating read. It was from a former Slovak officer fighting in the International Legion. It really cuts through the hype. You know, we see the highlight reels on Twitter where everything explodes, but we don't see the failures. He noted that standard hobby-grade FPVs have a failure or abort rate of around 25 to 30%.
Wait, so 1 in 4 just don't work.
Pretty much. Or they get jammed, or the battery dies before they find a target, or the video feed cuts out due to terrain. Plus, think about the setup time. He mentioned they take 15 minutes to set up taping explosives, pairing controllers, checking frequencies.
Right.
If you see a Russian tank moving across a field, you don't have 15 minutes. You need to launch now.
And that is the gap the Bolt-M fills. It's the difference between a science project and an actual weapon system.
Exactly. It bridges the gap between a $500 toy that might fail when you need it most and a $2 million Javelin missile that you can't afford to waste. Ukraine needs systems that work when the jamming is heavy and the target is fleeting.
And speaking of Ukraine's capabilities, that Kyiv School of Economics report,
Wow.
it called Ukraine a drone state. They're producing 10 million drones annually. That number is just staggering.
It is an industrial marvel. They have decentralized production to a degree we have never seen. But they are also shifting tactics. They are moving toward interceptor drones. Drones designed specifically to hunt other drones. To do that effectively, especially against fast movers, you need computer vision. You need that AI assistance because a human pilot often can't react fast enough to catch another drone in midair.
This leads us to the big debate, the economic one. I call it gold versus plastic.
I like that framing.
Here is the provocation, and I want you to push back on this because I think a lot of listeners will be thinking it. Why spend $40,000 or whatever the unit cost ends up being on one Bolt-M when for the same price you could buy like 80 cheap FPV drones?
Yeah.
Is this just the Pentagon overpaying again? Isn't quantity its own quality?
It is a valid question and one that taxpayers should be asking. But you have to look at the probability of kill, or PK. Let's say there is a high-value electronic warfare jammer protecting a Russian unit. That jammer is creating a bubble where no radio signals can enter.
Okay, so if I send my 80 cheap plastic drones into that bubble.
They all drop out of the sky. It doesn't matter if you send 80 or 800. If they rely on a radio link, they die. Your probability of kill is 0.
And you just wasted 40 grand.
You just wasted 40 grand on 80 drones, and the target is still operational and killing your friends.
So in that specific scenario, the cheap option is actually the wasteful option.
Precisely. But if you send one AI-hardened Bolt-M, it ignores the jamming, locks on visually, and destroys the jammer. Once that jammer is gone, then you can send in the cheap drones to mop up.
Oh, okay.
The gold drone succeeds where the plastic swarm fails. It is not about replacing cheap drones. It is about the high-low mix.
So you use the cheap stuff for general harassment and attrition, and the expensive stuff for the sniper shots that open the door.
That is exactly what the analysis from War on the Rocks and Expert Digital suggests. Ukraine uses mass-produced domestic drones to saturate the front. We're talking 1.5 million FPVs in 2024 alone. But they use Western tech or their own high-end domestic equivalents for time-sensitive, mission-critical targets.
Right.
You don't fire a Bolt-M at a single soldier in a foxhole. You fire it at the radar station that is blinding your other drones.
It's tactical economics.
Yeah.
And honestly, it changes who gets to blow stuff up.
That is the doctrinal shift. That is the huge takeaway here.
Right, because traditionally, let's play this out. If a squad leader saw a tank 15 kilometers away, what could they do? They get on the radio, they call artillery, or maybe they request an airstrike, and then they wait.
A lot of waiting.
They wait for approval, they wait for the plane, they wait for the shells.
And in modern war, by the time that approval comes, the tank has moved. Or the artillery is busy elsewhere. Or the radio call was intercepted.
But now, with something like the Bolt-M,
The squad leader has their own precision air force in a backpack. They see it, they decide, they strike.
the kill chain just collapsed.
It's compressed from hours to minutes?
I was reading that paper by Yulia Rezmeteva on AI-enabled drones, and she talks about this shift. She calls it a move from static physical defenses to dynamic monitoring networks.
It is a brilliant paper. She argues that we are moving away from trench lines being the primary defense, the World War I model, to a network of sensors and drones that constantly monitor and react. It's like a spider web. If you touch the web anywhere, something comes to bite you.
But she emphasizes a key ethical point. It's not just killer robots hunting humans indiscriminately, right?
Yeah.
Because that is the fear everyone has.
Correct. It is human on the loop. A human makes the ethical and tactical decision to engage. The AI handles the difficult technical part, the terminal flight, the wind correction, the target tracking. It lowers the skill floor.
So you don't need an ace pilot.
You don't need an ace pilot with thousands of hours of flight time. You just need a smart tactician who knows when to click go.
Rezmeteva also mentions decentralization, how Ukraine has brigades buying their own tech, iterating constantly.
And that is something the West is desperately trying to learn. The U.S. has the Replicator Initiative trying to mass-produce drones, but it's still a top-down Pentagon program. Ukraine is actually living it. They have decentralized innovation. A brigade finds a problem, calls a local manufacturer, and has a fix in a week.
Wow.
Russia's centralized model struggles to keep up with that agility.
We also have to talk about the European context here. There was a source discussing how Europe's drone defense is failing. That sounds alarming for anyone living in the EU.
It is a stark warning. European military infrastructure is vulnerable. We have seen drone incursions over bases and airports recently. Ukraine's defense of Europe isn't just a slogan. Their integration of these AI systems is building the playbook for how Europe defends itself.
And if Ukraine falls,
If Ukraine falls, that technology and combat experience moves right to NATO's border.
which makes the work Ukraine is doing even more critical. It's why there are initiatives like the One United fundraiser by the Serhiy Pertula Foundation specifically for interceptor drones. It's interesting. It's about crowdfunding the defense of the continent.
And it highlights that the defense industry isn't just big conglomerates anymore. It's startups, it's foundations, it's civil society. It is a total mobilization of intellect.
Now let's look at the future, because the tech is moving so fast. We talked about radio jamming and how AI solves it, but I saw a report from the War Zone about fiber optics.
Yeah.
That sounds almost retro.
It does, doesn't it? The FBI and military units are looking at fiber optic drones. Picture a drone with a literal spool of wire unrolling behind it as it flies.
Like a guided missile from the 1970s.
Exactly. But for drones, the advantage, you cannot jam a wire.
Right.
It is physically impossible to jam the signal unless you physically cut the cable. So as electronic warfare gets better and better, we are seeing a return to physical connections for that unbreakable link.
That's fascinating.
It's a fascinating counter-evolution.
It goes to show that in war, high tech sometimes loops back around to low-tech solutions that just work. Physics wins in the end.
And then there are swarms. The Kyiv School of Economics report mentions resilient encrypted swarm networks. The Bolt-M is a single unit now, but the software is designed for collaboration. Imagine 10 of them talking to each other.
So one spots a target?
One spots a target, shares the data, and another strikes.
That brings us to the human element. There's a quote that really stuck with me from a surrendered Russian soldier. He said, "On the battlefield, I did not see a single Ukrainian soldier, only drones."
That is the chilling reality of remote warfare. The front line is everywhere. The psychological pressure is immense. You are being hunted by machines that don't sleep, don't miss, and don't feel fear.
It really feels like we are seeing the iPhone moment of warfare. Just like smartphones replace landlines, cameras, and GPS units, these smart drones are replacing artillery spotters, airstrikes, and even snipers.
It is a paradigm shift. Expensive, clunky, centralized systems are being outpaced by smart, connected, mass-producible tech. Ukraine is the forge where this is happening. The Boltem is just one tool in a massive ecosystem of smart warfare.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. As these systems become fully autonomous and able to communicate with each other, are we approaching a point where the machines decide the tempo of the war faster than humans can react?
That is the big question. If a drone swarm can react in milliseconds, does the human operator become the bottleneck? Does the human become a liability? We might be entering an era where the speed of conflict exceeds the speed of human thought.
A terrifying and fascinating thought to end on. You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. If you found this deep dive valuable, please make sure you all subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.